Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Today is Wednesday, March the 15th, 2023. I'm Christopher Paget. I'm the president of the Kentucky Genealogical Society. My pleasure to welcome you to tonight's webinar with James Tanner. We do not have a handout for tonight's webinar. It is webinar only. We will be giving away a wonderful door prize, though, which is our new Essential Guide to Kentucky Family Research, which was just published this week. It's the first Kentucky guide that's been published in over 30 years. The last book published was Roseanne Hogan's book that she did with Ancestry.com, which was at the time just Ancestry. So this is a great resource for researching your Kentucky ancestors. James, can you give me a number between 1 and 57?
33.
Okay, 33 is Jane Charita. Jane, congratulations. I know you're a member and you have won the Essential Guide to Kentucky Family Research, and we will be sending that to you to your home address that we have on your membership record. So congrats. All right. Let's see here. We will be taking questions for James, and if you have a question during his presentation on the control panel for GoToWebinar, just type in your question and Elizabeth will be moderating the questions, and any questions that you have for him, just enter those in and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful co-host, Elizabeth Allen Pennybaker, to introduce James Tanner. Welcome, Elizabeth, and take it away.
Okay. So we're welcoming James Tanner tonight. James has a BA degree in Spanish and an MA degree in linguistics, both from the University of Utah. He has a JD degree in law from Arizona State University, and he was an Arizona trial attorney for 39 years. He's also been over 39 years in genealogical research. He's an avid blogger for Genealogy Star. He's served for 17 years as a family history volunteer, and he's also presently serving on the BYU Family History Library. He's on the board of directors of the Family History Guide Association. He's a presenter at expos and conferences in the US, Canada, and Europe. Previously, he was the owner of a retail computer business and an Apple Macintosh software company, and he was a professional photographer. He has 7 children, 34 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. He's also fluent in Spanish, and he's done extensive Spanish genealogical research. Welcome, James. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. And can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, we're going to talk today about what new technologies will aid you in finding your ancestors. And there's a couple of things. Of course, this implies that I'm not talking about every kind of technology, but just those that we think impact research and how they would impact the kinds of things that we do as genealogists. So we'll get moving here. And I would note that some things never seem to change. There's lots of very constants, and that's things, most of the genealogical records we use in our general views of general efforts at genealogy are things that happened in the past, and they're not going to change. They may disappear because of time and things like that, but basically we are going to be dealing with things that are already said and done and on paper. But technology is not one of those things. This is something that changes all the time, just constantly. And as I'll note here, even in the last couple of weeks, we've had some, I have found things that are going to have a tremendous impact on how and when and how we do genealogical research, beginning right now, beginning within the next few months and by next year. So we'll get into that a little bit also. And I kind of like to start by pointing out some of the things that we didn't have 60 years ago. Some of these things are so ubiquitous today, like my cell phone, my smartphone with a camera and things like that, that are part of just living today that I would never have thought about. And I always reflect on the tremendous impact on my life if I had computers when I was in high school, and times when I could have used the ability to gather information as quickly as I do today. It would have made a tremendous difference in a lot of things that went on. So you can see there's a list. I'm not going to go through everything, obviously, but there's a lot of interesting things here that we perhaps use daily. So what did we have? Well, what we had was a lot of paper, and some of us basically still have a lot of paper. And so this is still kind of, we're in a transitionary time when we're transitioning from paper to computers. We run into people constantly who have their paper records. So even though we have a library at the Brigham Young University Family History Library where I work there with my wife, even though we're there in a library full of computers and full of electronic equipment, we still have people hauling in their rolling suitcases full of their research and their papers. So that's going to take probably a few more years before that becomes very rare. I'm always not surprised, but always notice that when I go to the Salt Lake Family History Library, now Family Search Library in Salt Lake City, that if you go there early enough at 9 o'clock when it opens, there's usually about a couple of dozen or more people standing outside with rolling suitcases. So it's kind of a tradition there also. A couple of weeks ago, we had Roots Tech. Roots Tech is the big genealogy conference that's held in Salt Lake City in a conference center called the Salt Palace. And this year we had somewhere around 8,000 people, with about plus something over 300 and something thousand people online during that week of the conference. And if it goes like the year before, we'll have somewhere near 3 million people viewing the records and registering ultimately for the conference. And I just wanted to point this out because I'm going to mention some of the things that I learned at the conference, because that was for me a great opportunity to go back and meet with people that I hadn't seen for 3 years and renew for acquaintanceships and friendships, and participate with a lot of people at different levels. And some of my friends come from different places around the world, and they come, when they do come to Roots Tech, that's really the only time we see people in person. And matter of fact, I have been meeting with one of the people from Family Search for the entire 3 years of the pandemic. Every week, week after week, we meet online. We're on what's called the GEDCOM steering committee, the Genealogical Data Communications program that creates the possibility of moving data from one genealogy program to another. And we're in the process of updating that program. We released GEDCOM 7.0 about a year and a half ago, and we're continuing to have people adopt it. And it's a slow process because it's a major program, and it involves a lot of programming for any of the genealogical websites or larger programs that support it. So it's going to be a multi-year process to upgrade. But I'd seen this person every week for 3 years and had never met them in person. And there was another one the same that I'd met with regularly that I basically never met in person. So it was a really good experience. I note here that they're accumulating the videos on the rootstech.org website, which is free. And if you just register with a free registration, you can view all 4,205 videos. Probably can't view them all. Some of them are in other languages that you probably don't know. Anyway, moving along, I think that the ongoing revolution of technology that has impacted genealogy more than any other that we can imagine is the ability to digitize records and documents, photographs, and even digitize audio recordings and movies and all of the other things that we've been able to do. Turning them into digital files makes them, not only preserves them in a very pure format so that they will no longer decrease because of the physical decrease in paper and things like that, but it also provides a way by which the information can be moved readily across the whole world from the internet. So we can do researching records in a country in Europe, which would have cost us many thousands of dollars and many days of travel just to go to just a few years ago. So this impact goes on, but particularly focusing on the smartphones, the phones with built-in cameras, that if you realize the power of this and giving the contrast with the people standing in line with their rolling suitcases at the library, I can basically go to the library with my laptop and my phone, and I can do all the research that I need to do. I can find a book and take a picture of the title page, take a picture of the pages that I'm interested in and preserving, and I don't have to sit there and copy all that information out by hand, which is what I had to do when I began the process of doing genealogical research. And so making audio recordings many times during my the many years that I've been doing research, I would have it go to a relative's house and they would have a scrapbook or some other, something that was very important to them and which they would not part with. And I couldn't say, I'm going to borrow this and copy it. They say, no, I don't want it. You can't have it. But I could stand there and take pictures of the whole thing. And I was therefore preserving that information, even if I was unable to obtain a copy later of that particular document. And I know that's been happening regularly as time goes on. And another important thing is that we're able to have tremendously large collections of historical images. This is a part of the FamilySearch.org website. Many people don't know that there is one place on the website that has all of the images that they have for Family Search, and that is called the Images section. If you go to FamilySearch.org and then go to the Search tab, and you've got search for records, and then you have images. Well, that's not pictures, that's records. And all the records, they're there, whether they're digitized, whether they're indexed, whether they are in the catalog, or they're just sitting there in a huge pile, are part of this images collection. And it's organized in kind of an interesting way, and it takes a little effort to get into. But basically, all the images are there. I had, the other day, I had a professional genealogist who does regular articles for American, for the New England Historic Genealogical Society American Ancestors Journal. And he does that, and I showed him the images collection. He was totally unaware and found many images here of places in Massachusetts where he was doing research, and also in England. And on top of that, just simply did not know that there were these images that were not in the catalog and not in the indexed records on Family Search. So there's many more records there. Now, as I talk here today, you're going to find out that this process, the situation that's there with these unindexed records sitting on Family Search, is rapidly changing. And as we go through here, I'll explain how that's doing. So here's a list, for example, of some of the unindexed and uncatalogued records from Sweden that are on this in this images section, and there are 121,156 results. That means there's thousands and thousands of these records. Actually, what these are, every one of those lines, like say with 600 images, 635 images, that's the number of images that the people who are on site digitizing the records are sending to periodically to the Salt Lake Family History Library, to Family Search, and that they're processing. So that's one set of time, whatever. Usually when my wife and I were doing digitizing for Family Search at the Maryland State Archives, we were sending in the hard drives by FedEx every week, and I assume these are the periodically sent records. And for each set, the key here, of course, you need to know is that it says religious records. You're going to have to look at every single one of these sets of records, which is about 2,000 results, in order to figure out what's here. Of course, there are dates, and you know, so it's, and because it says, for example, confirmation records, it does not mean that's the only records in that set. Excuse me a second. Okay. Now, this is kind of the epitome, and I bring this up because when you talk about digitized records, you really need to have the perspective of what's going on in the greater world. And I always classify this as the fifth big website after Family Search and Ancestry and Find My Past and My Heritage. I would always add archive.org, because what archive.org is now the largest, technically the largest library, easily the largest library in the world that has clear, complete access to their materials. And the Library of Congress has always been held out there ever since I was starting college as the largest library in the world. Well, the largest library in the world, being the Library of Congress, first of all, most of those things are not accessible unless you go sit in the library. And even if you do that, if you've ever had that experience, you find out that you may have to wait as long as 3 or 4 days or up to a week before you get the records that you need transferred from wherever they're stored. But here on this website right now, there are 36 million books, completely digitized, completely searchable word for word. And I know of no larger collection of material, plus all the other stuff on this, billions of website images, all sorts of material on this particular one website. So I would just simply, in order to understand the impact that digitization is going to have on genealogy, you need to start looking here for your genealogical. You can search by name, you can search by title, by state, by county, whatever you want, and you will find material here that just remarkably amount of information. One thing about the website is everything on here is searchable by a Google search. It's all open to Google, and Google does a better job of searching on the archive. So when you do a Google search, you just put in, like I say, Kentucky state history, early pioneers or something of that nature in the search on Google, and put archive.org after it, and you have search directly on everything that's on the archive.org website. One other thing about it is that if the books are clearly not under copyright, if they're in the public domain, you can download a whole copy of the book, just in any format. The listed here is everything, including PDF and JPEGs and everything else. And they're still fully searchable. And so when you make a search, you can see here, there's a bunch of blue lines going across. It says 3 of 42. That's how many times that search term has shown up in this particular Wisconsin Magazine of History. And so these are the kinds of things that you can find. And I have been finding some records that I've, even on all my years of research, had never even imagined existed. So here's the download options in a little bit higher qualities. And having it as a PDF file is very, very convenient because you can also search the PDF files word for word. And if the books are copyrighted, so this is The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. And it's obviously a new book, and or fairly new, and it is it's completely searchable, but it is also borrowable. And you can borrow this book by simply getting a free login password on this website on archive.org. So you can borrow it for, depends on how new the book is whether you can borrow it for 2 weeks, for 1 day, or borrow it for an hour. Now, you might think that borrowing it for an hour is a problem. No, because you can just keep borrowing it for hour after hour after hour every time you run out of time. And the reason for that is it's only if someone else tries to check it out or checks it out when you are trying to get to it. So it's extremely easy to use and find the material that you have. And of course, if you find any information here, you can quote it, you can do whatever you need to do with the book's materials. One of the things that is just amazing is that so many times you go and you're sitting with, in the past, you'd be sitting with one of your older relatives and they start telling stories and things. And you say, oh, I wish I had my tape recorder. I wish I had some way to record this. Well, now we do. You can reach in your pocket, pull out your smartphone and do audio recordings. And there's you can do those on Family Search, and you can do them on MyHeritage. On Family Search, there's a time limit for the length of the audio file. There doesn't seem to be a limit on MyHeritage. They seem to allow much longer audio file recordings. Also, this is the one you can use, the app that you can use to record directly up to Family Search, and that's Family Search Memories app. It's on Android, both Android and the iOS or Apple operating systems. Now, at the BYU Family History Library and at the library up in Salt Lake, we have a whole variety of different types of equipment for digitizing. So you'll see here records that are for video, for audio files, for cassettes, high-speed scanner, right there, the kind of big white scanner is a Canon high-speed scanner. It will digitize double-sided 500 sheets, double-sided in about 5 minutes. So it's just amazingly fast process. And so this is one of the reasons why a lot of people come to the library, is to spend their time digitizing their records for free in the library. And as a note, all the images for this particular video that I created, that's up on YouTube on the BYU Family History Library YouTube channel, were done, and the video was all done digitally. I took the pictures with my camera, I put together the video on my computer and uploaded it to, had it uploaded to YouTube. So there was no paper involved. The whole process here was done digitally. Now, one of the things that you're probably hearing about in the news that seems to be pretty prevalent right now is discussions about the subject of artificial intelligence. Now, I think it was kind of one of those unfortunate names that stuck kind of thing. In other words, used when the term was coined, they said artificial intelligence. That got all over the media and every place, and so everybody thinks in terms of that. It's probably more accurate. It would have been very much more accurate to call it enhanced searching, electronic searching, because what the artificial intelligence really turns out to be is a way to search in a very extensive way, but then to create actions based on those searches. So when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're really talking about sort of a super enhanced Google search with some other programs added on that allow you to add or in different do some things to the material, the digitized images. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. This is for an abstract, and there's a kind of an underlying now discussion going on about the impact that artificial intelligence or AI will have on archives. And the one big topic here is handwriting recognition technology. So what has happened in the last, well, it's been more than 10 years now that I've been watching and talking to the people involved in developing handwriting recognition. And it was always, we're getting closer, we're getting closer, we're getting closer. Well, about 2 years ago, all of a sudden, there was no we're getting closer. They're just saying, well, we're improving it. And this is the reality today, that handwriting recognition is now more accurate for indexing handwritten documents than the actual living people doing the same job. So in other words, they're already outsourced. They've already passed out over the percentage of issues. So when they're talking about handwriting recognition, they're talking about the percentages of errors that occur as a result of looking at the handwriting. And we have massive statistics on the people doing that, because we've had people doing indexing off of handwritten records for years and years and years. And it's just clear now that the artificial intelligence handwriting recognition is far more accurate and consistently more accurate than almost anyone. And so in the last little while here, that impact has taken has done some tremendous things, and I'll keep it going. But now we're going to use the same technology to create a new technology, and this is something that was talked about at RootsTech during the time that I was there. This is by Family Search, and there's a section also in that in the search part of Family Search, where you have records, images, which I talked about, and searching the family tree. And then the next one's genealogies, which by and large has been pretty much ignored by everyone. And essentially what has happened here is that tremendous amounts of information have gone into the genealogies. And very shortly, because now of the artificial intelligence handwriting recognition, very shortly, much of the information, probably most of the information that's now been locked up in this communities section, is going to be readily available. And what they're doing with this is they're searching not only the records in the genealogies records, but all the records on Family Search. And as a result, using artificial intelligence, they have basically simulated what an expert genealogy would do, including the genealogical proof standard and cluster research and all of the different things that really involved and professional genealogy people use to find and identify the families. And they put all that into a set of instructions. And then they have created what are called computer generated trees. And what that ends up doing is it creates a, let's see if I have to click here, a collection of trees created by the computer. So it takes, for instance, a birth record in a parish register, and then it will take all the information about the individuals who was baptized or christened, and then they will add in all the relationships of all the other people mentioned, the parents, the grandparents, if they were witnesses, anybody that's involved, and construct a tree. And so that particular process is going to be applied. And so what might happen if you searched the computer generated trees on Family Search is, and I've seen this already demonstrated very, very accurately, you would search for an individual that you would guess would be in that particular parish register, like Mexico and in one of the states in Mexico. Nuevo León is the example. And they would, they only put that person in a family tree with his or her parents and grandparents and add, and in some cases, adding as many as 1,200 additional people from the records all at one time. Now, this is something that's just barely getting started, and the technology is mature, it's been tested, and when they do that, all of the sources and all of the information from the original record are included in the search. So you'll get to click on each one of those persons and see the attached source record that was there and verify it if you wish to do so. And I would suggest that that would be the case of each of those people. So this is going to be a game changer because of the enhanced way. Instead of spending a great deal of time looking page for page for additional parish registers, you will have therefore a map of that person's genealogy extracted from that particular record. And this particular one they've used is the state of Nuevo León in Mexico. It's the whole state record, about 1.2 million records that have been processed. And that will start happening across the world as they focus in on different jurisdictions. So their priority right now is Latin America, but because the records, the handwriting has been, all of the necessary programming has been to recognize the Latin American handwriting, and then they're going to use that. So they'll be moving across the world, bringing us up, and you'll see a lot more about that in the future. So handwriting recognition becomes the deal changer for opening up records that perhaps you yourself do not know how to read or cannot read. And I can assure you that the handwriting recognition, even 4 or 5 years ago, was recognizing old black letter handwriting from Germany back in the early 1800s, 1700s at 98-point-something% accuracy. So it's more than you can even imagine doing individually. Another effect of the handwriting recognition was when Ancestry began the process of indexing and using the 1950 United States federal census. And what happened is that in 1940, when they took the census, for the 1940 census back in 2012, it took them 9 months to do the initial indexing. And then there was corrections that were being made much longer than that. That same process that took 9 months in 1940, in 2022, took just 9 days, literally 9 days later, they had all the records indexed. Now, they partnered with Family Search to go through and check the recognition, the handwriting recognition effort to see if there was a problem. And I did a lot of that. I did enough checking to verify from my standpoint that they were pretty accurate. So I would find maybe 1 or 2 unreadable sections. And mainly it was not because the record had been incorrectly read. It was because the words were not words that you would think that would be there. And as they were doing the checking and going along with that, they were upgrading the ability of the program. So by mid-June or whatever in 2022, last year, Ancestry had a complete, workable, and very accurately indexed copy of the 1950 census, which the other large websites are just now starting to get online. So what is the effect of this? Well, many people have been volunteering over the hundreds of thousands of people have been volunteering with Family Search to do the indexing. Now, if you go in to find a project to do for indexing, you will find this. I had marked here that I would be doing I could do all levels, and I didn't care about the language, and there are no projects. And there are still a very, very, very few projects left, but, and they do show up occasionally, but now what we've done is moved on to the next level, which is reviewing the handwritten documents, which have now replaced the indexing. So the handwriting recognition is at verifying or adding more to it, that the words that don't happen to be recognized by the software. So this is the new project that will be going on. And all I can say now from some of the other discussions I have, there's going to be some other very interesting projects out there that are going to come in the next year or so. Now, one of the things that perhaps you won't connect with artificial intelligence is that the artificial intelligence is that programs of that type, that concept that if you put enough information and instructions into a program, that it will make it easier for people to gather information. It has been carrying along for quite a while with record matches and record hints. And so you'll find record matches and record hints listed in almost any, in all the major programs. Now, some of us realize that they're not all going to be correct, and so we review those very carefully and make sure that they are correct. But in my case, in looking for records from around the 1800s to the mid 1900s, let's say that's the area that I would be focusing on in a lot of cases, because I'm doing descendancy research. Record hints have saved me just hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of work, because I do not have to look up every single record that I find. And because I don't have to look up the records, I've been able to find a lot more information than I would have ever found previously. So this is another benefit. Now, one of the side benefits is that even though we have a tendency to look at that the big websites have all of or have tremendously large volumes of information, we need to remember that they're not the only ones out there doing digitizing records, and they're not the only ones that are benefiting from those records. And so you're going to find things like this online if you search, and that is, this one happens to be an example of the Museum of Danish America that has newspapers and Danish records and genealogy records and resources. And so there's a lot of these individual ones, and many of the countries around the world have digitized their own records. Canada has a lot of, in their Canadian National Archives, has a lot of digitized records. Ireland is in the process of adding a lot of digitized records. England, obviously, Germany has their own huge amount of digitized records. All the countries have their own records digitized, and they're certainly not in any way do the large websites have so many records that they can basically say no one else needs to look anyplace else, because that is very far from the case. Another thing that is that kind of you take as a matter of just what's going to happen in the world, sort of, is that you can read books online, And some people, obviously, the book business is not, the paper book business is not going to go out of business very soon, if ever. There are people constantly tell me that they'd rather hold the book and read it than look at it online, but there's those of us, I guess my wife and I are probably in the major push on this because we've been reading stuff online for as long as we've had it available. But the convenience for me of being able to pull my phone out of my pocket and read a book or watch an instructional video just kind of overdoes the fact that I have paper books laying around now that I haven't looked at for a long time. That isn't to say that I don't have some books that I do pull out of the bookcases and use when I'm doing research, because it's sometimes much easier and faster to get the book out than it is to try to find the same information. But one of the things that you perhaps should be aware of, and maybe most of you are aware of WorldCat, and worldcat.org is now the largest library collection of library catalogs that there are in the world. There are billions of catalog entries in here, billions, and not just the material. This isn't the records. This is just telling you where all the information in the libraries are around the world. And this is another very fast moving and very important part of the digital revolution that's been going on now. So here's, for example, a book that you could find, Old Fort Johnson and W. Max Reed, and it would tell you that it's in the Internet Archive. So now you can just click on that book and look through and search for any information about your ancestors, if in fact that happens to be the place where they came from, or if they might be in this book. And you might be surprised. And I am continually surprised. So this is something that you're not going to, that is something you just really need to know about. Now, Google Translate continues to become, to include more and more languages, and does the transcriptions. And from the standpoint of translating and working with languages, now, for example, my familiarity with languages, having taken a number of languages and studied them intensively. For instance, when I have a few minutes to get back reoriented, I can start reading Danish records and not have too much trouble translating Danish records. But in case I can't remember a word or whatever, I can always click over to Google Translate and put that term or that into Google Translate and have it instantly translated into English. So this is like kind of a crutch. Obviously, you wouldn't be allowed to do this if you were taking a language course, and they wouldn't give you Google Translate for your test, or it wouldn't be a test. But it basically helps me to maintain my ability to help people in a variety of different languages that otherwise I would not be able to remember all the time. So we're going on. Now we're going to, for the last few minutes here, we'll go into the DNA testing and how that is affecting. It obviously, if you are a person who did not know your biological parents, or because you were adopted, or because you were a foundling and somebody left you on a doorstep someplace, DNA testing has been, and the proliferation of the family trees with DNA testing has created a tremendous aid for identifying people who otherwise would have no genealogical connection with anyone. And so here we are, and we have a number of big programs going. And what I've understood recently, and what was kind of emphasized at RootsTech, at the conference at RootsTech, was that there are only really five companies out there that are really involved in genealogical DNA testing to the point where they can help you find ancestors. Now, you need two things. You need the DNA testing, but you also need a substantially large family tree. So my Ancestry and MyHeritage are basically the two large companies that fulfill that. MyHeritage is has many more tests in Europe than Ancestry, and Ancestry probably has many more in English-speaking world than MyHeritage. But by taking tests at both, and by uploading your Ancestry results to MyHeritage, you get the benefit of both of the databases and have a lot of people that you can find. Now, one of the things we're showing an ethnicity estimate, and that's for me has always been kind of an interesting situation, because my ethnicity estimate does not necessarily reflect what I have found doing genealogy for the last 40 years. As far as the main things, English, it's not a surprise. Obviously, English and English language people in the United States are not something that new to me, or any new good. It would not be news. It would just sort of confirm something that was very obvious. And the fact that my next level was Irish, Scottish, and Welsh connections is also unsurprising, and Scandinavian even, because I know and done research of my Scandinavian ancestors. Once you move into Italian, however, I'm puzzled, because I never understood why I would have Italian ancestors, and I've never run across anyone from Italy. But this means I have genetically related people who are in Italy. And why would that be the case? Well, over the last year or so, in thinking about this and talking to my immediate family, mainly my two daughters, who are very much involved in genealogical research at a extreme level of proficiency. Basically, what they have, we've all kind of gotten together. And it was obvious once you begin to understand what was going on here. I have a family line that goes to the Netherlands, and they're Jewish, and they came from Eastern Europe. And so the Latvia, Lithuania, and Belarus connection is probably through those people that have stayed there, who are my relatives because of the people that I'm related to through that line. The Italian line is kind of not as easily understood, but Italy was in the British Isles for 500 years. And there were a lot of people that probably have Italian ancestors who don't realize it. Now, the other one was a little bit different. We couldn't do that. And then it turns out that one ancestral line that goes back of two people who married into the family, my direct line ancestors, are probably Romani, or from that far part of that part that's over there to India and Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran, and etc. And they are known as travelers in England, and in most of the world is known as gypsies. And so I have basically now, after these many years of staring at the ethnic estimate, I have a fairly good explanation for the connections I have in each of these seemingly surprising areas. So this is kind of an interesting thing. It doesn't really help in some ways. Now, one thing that's come up from the artificial intelligence has been its effect on photo enhancing, repair, colorization, and animating. And these came from MyHeritage. And the original is the black and white image on the left, and this is the colorized image that was made by MyHeritage. And this is a process that's basically part of the MyHeritage subscription, and sometimes it's free to people who want to use it. But it's kind of an amazing technology. And this technology is going to have a greater and greater impact, because there's some things that are happening that go beyond this. One of this is one is pretty spooky. It's actually kind of scary because they can animate the images that are online. And the connection that goes even further, and a lot of this was happening at Roots Tech, was they do stories where the person actually talks and tells their life story. And that's pretty impressive too. All this has been pushed by MyHeritage and now copied by lots of people online, but no one quite does it as well. And if you wanted to, and as mentioned at the beginning, I'm a professional photographer and have been for many, many years. And I use, the high level programs like Photoshop and Lightroom and all those things to enhance my photos and on occasion. And MyHeritage still does it better than Photoshop. So, you just never know. So here's what an example of what MyHeritage can do. The photo on the left has sort of typical color shift that is part of the chemical reactions of the emulsions used for the photograph. And it's hard, you can't stop it. In other words, this is just a natural degradation. But on the right is the photo enhanced photo. And I left it without changing anything else. And that is just what happened to the original, restoring the original colors of the photograph. Some of you may be acquainted with what's called cluster research, and MyHeritage has managed to, in a sense, using artificial intelligence to create a way to do that sort of automatically. It's not something I can go into very much, but it's part of the program, and it'll create the clusters for you without you doing the great. It's very kind of sometimes tedious work of creating each of the clusters. And I'm just going to mention a few of these things because each one would take a whole hour to explain in detail. Ancestry has created what they call through lines, and what that does is it says we have generated lines for all of these of my ancestors, basically showing me how I am genealogically related to this, but also adding in all the other people who are genealogically related to these people. And so, and genetically, genetically related to these people. So in each case, like the one we have that highlighted, I have 7 DNA matches. And so those are giving me, and they'll show me the paths of how the people here on Ancestry are related. This is helpful in the sense that you may find information you don't know, but it often confirms the fact that your research is correct, and that if there's any dispute, you now have scientific support for the conclusions you made about who was your ancestors. Okay, I got to get out of Zoom because I'm not in Zoom, so it doesn't matter. Normally that would be, oops, we're offline. This is another way of looking at it. This is by parent matches, and one of the things that is happening at Ancestry, and it's announced at Roots Tech, was more specific information about those portions of your DNA that were inherited from each of your 2 parents. So everyone gets 50% from their male parent and 50% from their female parent. And because of that, there are always questions. And so there's going to be more and more information showing you which different kinds of things, being able to trace inheritable diseases in more detail and things like that. That's the kinds of things that are going on. Another one that was quite different, and this is going to have a tremendous impact also, is MyHeritage. Previously, if you had 100% relationship shown on your DNA, and they say something like this: you're 100%, you have 100%, and the person is either your mother, your father, your uncle, your aunt, your sibling, or some other person. Okay, well, what MyHeritage has done with what they're called their Centimorgan explainer is that they've broken that down into individual relationships, and then they're actually putting them into plain language. So instead of having a fourth cousin 2 generations removed or 4 generations removed or whatever, they've put it in a chart where you can understand the relationship, and then showing you the percentage of relationship to the people that you want to see who is, and it's a little app program that you put in the names of the people, and then it will calculate. Obviously, they've both had to have the DNA test, but then it will calculate and show you the chart of exactly how much relationship you have to that particular person and who would be the most likely identifying that person. You may not know the relationship until you see something like this that explains it. It's very straightforward. So this is kind of, all of these things are happening so quickly, it's very, very hard to keep up. This, for example, is another artificial intelligence, which is a patented program called Related Faces, that will identify whether 2 people are related, and also if there are 2 photographs and one was somebody young and somebody old, they can tell if that was the same person. So if you have a family group, it will also, over time, and this is a brand new program, but over time it will be able to show the names of each of those people in their relationship. If not the names, they'll be able to say this is a brother, this is a mother and father, and so forth. And that kind of relationships, because of the huge databases that they're gaining access to. Okay, just a long note here, all the family history centers, all 5,000 plus across the world, are now called family search centers. And that's was just a branding process by Family Search that they wanted to clarify that Family Search was not separate from family history centers, that they are family search centers. And so that's where it, and there was a change in the branding, as you can see on the Family History Library here in Salt Lake City, that's changed. Interesting side note, BYU's Family History Library is still the BYU Family History Library because it is BYU and not Family Search. Okay, well, what will the future offer to us? Probably a lot more than we can comprehend, and I can clearly and unequivocally say that there will be some major changes to FamilySearch.org over the next year or so, and lots of other companies also. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much. That is absolutely fascinating and a little unnerving, those animations. So thank you so much for sharing all this with us. And we have lots of questions, so I'm just going to go straight into them. So first of all, the one person expressed the hope that the handwriting recognition technology is going to be used to make the Draper manuscripts available. And I'll broaden that out to a question of, do you know of any particularly important genealogical collections or documents that are sort of on the docket to be, sort of subjected to the handwriting recognition?
I think that it's just going to be general. The number of I get a weekly report from Family Search about the number of records that are being indexed each week. And about 3 or 4 months ago now, the numbers were in the hundreds and suddenly jumped to the millions.
Good.
And so now we're seeing a set of records being put in as indexed of over 1 or 2 million records in a week. And so as that happens, everything that has a possibility of being on
computer and it would not connect for some reason,
and
so
are just simply going to be sucked into that eventually. So I'm
I'm
sure almost any handwritten document online is eventually going to be transcribed.
And is there a way to put in a plug for one's favorite set of records?
I have asked that question. And the answer is, we have planned this out a long time in advance. We know what we're going to do.
All right, so they know. Another question is a person sort of looking for something specific, but I think also it has broadly applicable sort of, question involved in it, which is somebody's looking for a photo of a person who lived in Kentucky, born in 1902 and died in 1937, and they're looking for a photo of somebody that they were never able to meet, a family member that they only recently discovered that they were connected. And they're wondering if there's some kind of technology that would enable them to locate family members that they don't have a lot of information based on their own face, or
Yes,
something that AI can do.
Except, did you say they died in 1837?
1937.
Oh, 1937. I was going to say,
19.
if you died in 1837, you don't have any photographs. Because photography wasn't invented until 1854. Okay, but in any way, the answer is yes. That's going to happen. That is inevitable. The people that I've been talking to that have that technology are basically trying to get access to being with the large websites. So the larger websites will start to incorporate that kind of technology. Yeah.
Do you have any leads for this person? Sorry, go ahead.
No time. We don't know. However it happens, probably faster than we can think of.
Yeah. This stuff is accelerating. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just, you can't. All I did for 3 days at RootsTech was talk to people and have my mouth open.
We have one person who's wondering if there's any DNA test that is best for genealogy that will be the most fruitful if they're only going to take one.
Sure.
There is no best. They are all very similar testing wise. They're all very similar. There's no one that's better testing. It depends on where your ancestors lived. If your ancestors are from Europe, you definitely need to have MyHeritage, because Ancestry does not have enough people in Europe. And Ancestry, if you're doing a British or American, you need to be in Ancestry. And if you're doing, or any British Empire, Canada, Australia, whatever. The other companies, there are 3 more that have sizable databases, but they simply don't have enough people on them that it would be any kind of, you just be chance if you happen to hit somebody.
And do you have a recommendation for somebody who has African ancestry? What might be the best company for them?
Okay, so
right now there is one company that has Africa, that specializes in that, but their database is very small, relatively. And the best way would be Ancestry and MyHeritage both, because they have the most. And MyHeritage has users, they have 106 million users in all the countries of the world. So their chances of finding people are much higher.
Okay.
And I apologize in advance. My dog is telling me about how he wants to go out.
My wife is online to talk to somebody too. So, and we're sitting next to each other, so that we have to kind of keep our voices down. So.
Yeah.
So another person is asking if there's any vendors, if there were any vendors at RootsTech that had something that just kind of blew you away, or that you think is going to be the thing in the coming years.
Well, the last one I highlighted, which was called Related Faces, that's a patented new technology, and the experiences that we were getting at RootsTech were remarkable. For instance, 2 ladies came in. They had 2 pictures. One was of a young woman, and one was an older lady. And the older lady was the only photograph they had of their mother.
What a nightmare.
And they wanted to know if the other photograph was their mother. And after they put it through their system, they were able to, with very, very high level of certainty, say that, yes, that is your mother. So they now had 2 photographs. It was very emotional. They were all sitting there crying. So it's remarkable technology, and it'll make a lot of difference as we go into the future. So And there was other thing. There were a lot of a lot of the businesses were talking about artificial intelligence parts of what they were doing. Okay.
Well, you could
What
try
else?
it.
Are you popping on because you're calling time, or you want to ask a question?
How?
Can't hear you.
Whoops. Chris, can we hear? We can't hear you.
I think we've had some good questions.
The merger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to everybody for wonderful questions.
That's what I'm not.
Yeah, thank you. And sure, I appreciate it. You're welcome to have me come or talk or, and I kind of say at the end here that the BYU Family History Library has a virtual help desk. It's open. It's an open Zoom account that runs from noon till 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time, Mountain Daylight Time, Monday through Thursday, and then noon to 6 on Friday. And if you just go to the website, click on the link to the virtual help desk, you are talking to the library. And if you need to talk to me or one of the other missionaries that are there, you can ask that. And we have a long list of all the languages we support. Almost anything that you can think of, we can find somebody at BYU that talks it. So.
Well, James, thank you so much for such an exceptional presentation. Thanks to Elizabeth too for doing such a great job with questions. I really appreciate it. And James, we will have you back. So thank you so much. And before we wrap up, folks, we'll let James get off because he's probably got something else to move on to. You probably got another webinar, but we just have a couple little of housekeeping here on the tail end. So if you'll just hang with me, folks. Just a few future programs. On March 23rd, we've got Melissa Barker, our own archive lady, and around here we call her director because she serves on our board. She's going to be doing a webinar on finding aids, the roadmap to any Kentucky manuscript collection. We have Maureen Brady coming to do a webinar for us on the first frontiersman, the Scots-Irish. We've had a great response to this program so far. So if you haven't registered for that, my guess is if you've got Kentucky roots, you probably have some Scottish ancestry, and you definitely want to hear what Maureen has to say. She is a wonderful speaker. Faye Stallings, who's one of our members, she's also the president of the Board for Certification of Genealogists. She's going to be doing a case study on her ancestors that came into Kentucky from North Carolina. That's on April the 25th, using the genealogical proof standard. Follow the genealogical proof standard. It will not steer you wrong. Jennifer Rodzant will be coming on April 27th to talk to us about overcoming record loss in Kentucky. Our Vice President, Kathy Kieser, is going to be doing a webinar for us on Chinese migrants to Kentucky, how they came and what they brought. You might say, well, I don't have Chinese ancestors. Let me tell you something. Anytime you have an opportunity to participate in one of these webinars, whether or not they're tied to ancestors you have or someone else, you may learn some insights that could help you with your research. So, and I'll just say that what Kathy's going to share is just absolutely fascinating. So that's a great program on May 11th. Be sure you register for it. Melissa Barker is coming back on May 16th to talk to us about preserving your Kentucky ancestors' handmade textiles and quilts. We have a lot of those in Kentucky. She's going to be talking to us about archival best practices and what to do with those and how to preserve them. Glenn Riggs is going to be kicking off one of our Researching in the County series, and he's going to be talking to us about researching in Henderson County, Kentucky on May 23rd. We'll be having some focused webinars in the future, specifically targeting specific counties or regions in the Commonwealth, and Glenn will be doing Henderson County. And Fred Joseph, this may or may not happen. Fred's house, unfortunately, was just severely damaged through the storms that came through about a week ago. He had some massive oak trees fall down on his house, but at some point he will be talking to us about Kentucky Jewish genealogy. It's scheduled for June 1st. If it doesn't work out on that date, because they're currently rebuilding his house, we will have that on the docket for later in the year, but that will be a wonderful presentation. And Fred has insights about just genealogy in general. So again, you don't have Jewish ancestors, I still would come to hear what he has to say, because it doesn't matter what the topic is, you probably can learn something that you can apply to your research. I always want to share with everybody, you're invited to write for us. We have the Bluegrass Roots blog. It's now being read by over 5,000 folks, which is amazing, and it continues to grow. And if you haven't already, you want to snag your copy of the Essential Guide for Kentucky Family Research. That's the first published guide for Kentucky research in over 30 years. Some of you may know that one of our members, Roseanne Hogan, she, with Ancestry, before it was Ancestry.com, published a guide to Kentucky research in 1992. That book is, it's no longer available. You can sometimes get used copies of it, but this is the real first guide available for Kentucky research in over 30 years. All sales of the Essential Guide for Kentucky Family Research, which is available on Amazon, go to the digitization of Kentucky Rare Records. So it was a compilation of 18 writers who are all either members or folks that are connected to the society. One of our wonderful board members, Trisha Anderood, she was the driving force behind that book. It is now available. Beth Blankenship, another one of our members, she was key in editing a lot of the book, but it's a wonderful book. So please get your copy, give it as gifts. It makes a wonderful Mother's Day, Father's Day present. If you've got a cousin that's just getting into genealogy, if you have a friend who's just retiring and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my time, buy them the book, and who knows, they might get the genealogy bug and start getting into Kentucky research. But that is now available on Amazon, and you want to go get that. Okay, and then finally, we've got these wonderful front porch talks that you can join in if you're a member. We have one for DNA, for pre-1850, and Scots Irish. And these are groups that are just more social interactions. So if you are like, you know, I need to interact with folks, I want more social interaction, you can join these front porch talks. And all you've got to do is send an email to membership@kygs.org. And that goes to our VP of Membership, Kathy Keyser, and she'll get you plugged into one of these. Always invited to participate as a volunteer. You can do that at kygs.org. I want to thank Elizabeth Allen Pennybaker for doing a phenomenal job of hosting this evening. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And with that, we will wrap up. Elizabeth, anything you want to say before we close tonight?
No, just thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. And before we wrap up, just ask everyone to keep the family of Melissa Barker in your thoughts. Her father-in-law, they were dealing with her father-in-law passing. So please keep her in your thoughts this evening. And she regretted not being able to participate. But thanks, everybody. And I hope you have a good evening, and we'll see you on a future webinar. Thanks and take care. Bye-bye.